he gets, the older I feel. Thank you, Dave, for that kind introduction. My name is Eleanor McMahon, and I'm the CEO of the Share the Road Cycling Coalition. As I look out of the room, there's several familiar faces, so welcome. And I look forward to meeting those of you that I haven't had a chance to meet. Our organization spans the province, and we spend a lot of time talking to municipal leaders just like you. So this is another important opportunity for us to have a conversation with you about cycling policy in Ontario, strategies to make your communities more bicycle friendly, some of the trends that are shaping cycling, and particularly in rural and small town Ontario. A lot of people think that cycling is just a big city thing, and while you're here in Toronto, you're going to see the kind of vast and vibrant cycling culture that Toronto has. Stand in any of the intersections, and you'll see the numbers of people that are on their bikes every day. In some parts of Toronto, right downtown here in particular, 15 to 20% of people are riding their bicycles every day as their primary mode of transportation. Cycling is increasingly that daily transportation for people in the smaller areas of Ontario. As Marlene will outline for you, cycling tourism is probably the fastest growing dynamic that is shaping the conversation in our province today. Whether you're in those big cities, because they're interested in those tourism dollars as well, and our smaller town colleagues, many of whom are here today. So I'm happy to hear with Marlene and Dave, two leaders in the cycling conversation in our province, and two people that I have the pleasure of working with. Thank you for the kind introduction, Dave. As Dave mentioned, our organization has been working vigorously since 2008, and as any good cyclists, and I'm a motorist too, by the way, as 89% of Ontarians are. We work closely with the CAA, we do a lot of polling work, and so do they. And really, the conversation is changing in our province as we see the numbers of people, again, as I mentioned, on their bicycles every day, using the bike as a primary mode of transportation. And in places around the world where cycling happens as a part of everyday transportation, the people who are good at it have understood and embraced the fact that bikes are here to stay, they aren't a passing fad, and making it easy and safe and convenient for people to ride their bicycle has tremendous benefits for you, no matter how big the community is. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about our organization, because as the cycling file has grown, so have we, and so it's a tale of two partnerships, our growth as an organization and the growth of cycling, the changing conversation that I mentioned, and of course, something I think Minister Murray will reference in his speech today, the new Cycling Ontario strategy that we launched with him last August here in Toronto at a news conference. So a little bit about our organization, launched in 2008. Like any good non-for-profit, we did a tremendous amount of research. We spent a lot of time talking to people across Ontario and across North America. I live in Burlington, and I went to Apeldoorn, where we're twinned. How many of you have twinned cities? I'm sure a number of you. No hands going up? Nobody's twinned? Some. Come on, raise your hands. Do we need more coffee, Dave? So my city is twinned with Apeldoorn and Holland, so I went with members of council to Apeldoorn and had a revolutionary experience looking at a mid-sized city in Holland that for the last 40 years, that instead of building more roads, has invested steadily in transit and in cycling mechanisms. They focused on the smart stuff, which is trips under 5 kilometers, and they made it easy and safe for people to take their bikes. So guess what? As a consequence, most people do. Sure, they still use their cars, they absolutely do. It's not an anti-car message, it's how can we make our communities safer, more connected, focus on the higher density areas, and getting people from A to B by biking and by walking, two of the fastest, easiest, and best for you forms of transportation. So our organization really grew out of that growing and burgeoning desire to make Ontario a more bicycle-friendly province. And as we talked to people, they said, we'd like you to be the voice provincially for cycling across our province. Take our issues to Queen's Park and create a role for our provincial government, and that's what we've done. So we've grown to over 5,000 stakeholders. Certainly many of them are cyclists, but many of them are people just like you, local experts, municipal officials, public health, law enforcement. In short, everybody who has an interest in making their community healthier, safer, more vibrant. That's who's at the cycling table, and that's who's part of the cycling conversation. We're solutions-based. We work in an evidence-based framework. It doesn't get measured, it doesn't get managed, and so we focus on polling and data to make the case for investment. And as anybody who works at the park will tell you, I'm constantly haranguing ministers and knocking on the door of the opposition, talking about why it's important that they invest in cycling. Consistent advocacy is the name of the game for us. We have a strong stakeholder base across our province, and that network of experts and advocates are really critical and key to our mission. As a consequence, we've got to become the go-to provincial cycling organization the government turns to for advice, and we're delighted and honored to be in that position today. There's a lot of stuff on this slide. I just want to draw your attention to the circles and really demonstrate that we focus on 3 areas of activity we try to do well. Advocacy, creating political champions, navigating the municipal sector, and focusing on Queen's Park. Building capacity in the burgeoning cycling movement across the province with communities like yours, and changing the conversation from what used to be an anti-car, or framed by the media anyways, the war on the car and cars versus bike. That dynamic is really ancient history now. It's not about anti-bike whatsoever. It's not an anti-bike car message, at all. And I think our relationship with the CAA, I'm going to talk about that now, really has shaped that differently. So you might find it interesting that the CAA has jumped on board to be a cycling advocate and to advocate for the kinds of things that we want to see. But it really isn't that incongruent with their central message. They're interested in mitigating congestion, they're interested in road safety, and both of those things are things that we're interested in too. So when you find a partner who has 5 million members across the country, how many people CAA members in this room? Yeah, okay. 60% of the CAA membership, they discover, rides their bike on a regular basis. So the CAA saw an opportunity to serve their membership and be a voice for them on road safety issues, on investments in cycling, and making that roadway, that space that we share, more predictable, safer, and working with government and working with partners like us to change the conversation and make it a much more productive conversation from a legislative perspective and otherwise as we move through the kinds of changes that we're seeing now. So we do safety and education campaigns with the CAA. They're deeply invested in driver training and cycling education, and we are too. They're a sponsor of our Bicycle Friendly Communities program. If you can see the little sign down here, my colleague Justin, raise your hand, where is he? Runs that program, there he is. So you can talk to Justin after. I've got a pitch on the Bicycle Friendly Communities program. I'm an advocate. If I didn't make the pitch, what would I be? So this is really the span of the work that we do across our province, and of course, it keeps us busy. My mother would say it keeps me out of trouble too, but when it comes to Queen's Park, the happy story about this slide is that it's not just MTO and Ministry of Infrastructure, although they are our main agency in government, of course, and we're delighted to be part of the Minister's Working Group on the Ontario Cycling Strategy and honored by that role. So we navigate pieces of the cycling conversation with MTO, certainly, but it's the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, it's the Ministry of Education, it's the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport. All of these government ministries now are looking at cycling as an opportunity to improve the health of Ontarians, make our roadways safer through amendments to the Highway Traffic Act in particular, look at active and safe routes to school and ways to get our kids riding and walking to school. I don't know about you, but I grew up in an era where according to a McGill study in the late 90s, more than 86% of Ontario school children in 1971 rode their bikes and walked to school. And that figure has completely shifted now to become less than 14% on average. So we need to get our kids walking again and cycling to school, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing that. We've done a lot of work on our province in this regard. It's absolutely doable. I'm not talking about areas where children bus 20 kilometers to school, but in places in the GTHA in particular, where kids have a 2.5 kilometer voyage to school in the morning, and the drop-off zone is chaotic, and that's peak travel. If we can get those cars off the road and getting our kids to school ready to learn, and with 40 minutes of kind of healthy exercise under their belt, why wouldn't we do that for our children, for our society, for our future? So that piece around active and safe routes to school, just a little passionate about that, as you can tell. Marlene's going to talk to you about the vigorous and very interesting tourism dynamic that's shaping our province right now, but it's very exciting. Here we are with a few of our friends there at Queen's Park Lobby Day, which this year, shameless plug, April 15th. Last year at our Bike Summit, we announced an all-party cycling caucus. You'll recognize Councillor Flynn on the left-hand side. Sorry, these slides keep moving. Norm Miller next to me, of course, and on his left, Mike Cole. Why did we do this? Because we're in a minority parliament situation, and as you know, sometimes there can be vigorous disagreements, and that's healthy for democracy. Except in the cycling conversation, what we're finding is there's a tremendous amount of political will on this topic. And that's a good thing, because when it comes to the safety of our children, the safety of our communities, the health and well-being of our citizens, that is not a partisan conversation, and it shouldn't be. Let's find the intersections where people agree, and fortunately there are many. And I know from talking to Mr. Murray that he sees this as well. There's a lot of political will in the cycling conversation right now, and these three generous MPPs are helping us to navigate that conversation. Here they are on the left at our Youth Bike Summit that we held this fall, when we brought young people from across the province to Queen's Park to tell the story to MPPs about the importance of investing in cycling for the future and the health and well-being of young people. Our All-Party Cycling Caucus, as I mentioned, is helping us to have that meaningful dialogue. It's focusing on a common agenda and really extending cycling beyond MTO to the ministries that I mentioned. And then finally, of course, they're looking at common ground, constructive ideas as we change the Highway Traffic Act. I'll get to that in a moment. So what's our advocacy agenda, you might ask? What is Share the Road asking the province to do? Well, this is the action plan for the cycling strategy, which we announced with Minister Murray last fall, is in progress right now, and that's going to be tabled this spring, so we're very excited about that. We've been asking for 5 years now for a 1% solution, so take 1% of the budget at MTO and give it to municipalities by way of funding to help them build cycling infrastructure and focus uniquely on cycling infrastructure. All of you in this audience can tell me a story of the infrastructure needs in your communities, whether it be bridges, wastewater treatment plants, and all the other infrastructure pieces that you need. But there really isn't a unique funding envelope for municipalities right now around cycling, and that's what we've been advocating for. By contrast, in Quebec, the province there has invested over $200 million, and BC for some time has had a funding envelope that sits around $30 million that municipalities can apply to for cycling infrastructure and other funding programs. So it's time that Ontario got on the bandwagon and realized that. And in Minister Murray, we have a minister who is looking very strongly at we hope, and possibly announcing some infrastructure funding that will help all of you to move your communities further. So get those shovel-ready projects ready. That's my message. Cycling education, very much front and center. Everybody, I mentioned earlier the Active and Safe Routes to School thing. I used to get cycling education in school, as many of you will remember. The safety elephant, yeah. And I know, showing my age, right? But we got that in school, and we had that education. We learned how to ride our bicycle at my grade school, and we had police on staff, and they helped us. So my parents didn't have to worry about teaching me to ride a bike. And in today's busy society, where both parents are working, and there's less time, we really need a new cycling education program for Ontarians. And modernizing that Highway Traffic Act is critical. I've talked with a few of you already this morning about the importance of paving shoulders. We've been working with Norm Miller. He tabled his private members bill again. The minister's been extremely receptive to that, and I think you might see something in legislation very soon with respect to that. So fingers crossed. I want to talk to you now about the new Cycling Ontario strategy. When we started our work in 2008, we began to think about what a new role for our province might be. There hadn't been a policy update in cycling in 21 years in our province. So we kind of said, it's about time. 1992 is a distant memory. It's time for Ontario to have a new cycling strategy, like Quebec, like British Columbia, where we have the provincial government at the table and engaged on this file in an important way. Infrastructure funding, policy frameworks, connecting the dots within government, and a broad vision for cycling has been missing. And with Minister Murray, when he came on board, he vigorously took hold of the issue after his colleagues had done a considerable amount of work as well, moved that file forward, and really took it home last September, as Dave was mentioning. He put together a working group with stakeholders, including members of the municipal sector in 2013. And since then, we've all been working on creating that vision that Ontario will be the most bicycle-friendly province in, Canada's missing at the end. As I mentioned, First update, 21 years. A 20-year vision. We need to look out from where we are today and figure out where we're going. Where you're going, you're not going to get there. So the strategy lays out 5 strategic directions that will take our province into the future and begin to embrace the opportunities inherent in investments in cycling. What's next? The action plan, the legislative modernization that we're hoping is coming very soon to the legislature. That will include things like a 1 meter safe passing law and that paved shoulder piece that I mentioned. And maybe, who knows, infrastructure funding for municipalities. That would be a happy day for all of us. Polling data. Just want to give you a sense of scope of what cycling looks like in our province right now. 4.5 million Ontarians are riding their bike at least once a month, up from 28% to 36% in the past 2 years. 600,000 people in Ontario are riding their bikes every day. That's a big number. That's not a fad. Those are tremendous numbers of people who are in your communities who are getting their bikes out of the garage and instead of taking their car, are getting on 2 wheels instead of 4. A huge increase in the number of people who want to ride, from 53% to 69% in just 3 short years. That's phenomenal. More people want to ride their bikes. What's the number one reason people don't ride? They're too afraid to ride. We're working at fixing that, and I think government is also, between you and what the province is doing, you're going to see that number decrease as more and more people get on their bikes for the sheer enjoyment and the sheer satisfaction and convenience of riding their bikes. So this broad agreement, I mentioned the school traffic planning piece, but we also ask people, what should the province be doing? Investing in cycling and walking is part of a long-term transit plan. Invest in infrastructure so more people can ride their bikes, 74% agree. Earmark a portion of road spending, I like this one, 71% agreement. And 89% of people say, yeah, province should be investing in developing outcome and safe school plans. Those are, by any standard, really strong numbers of people who believe that the Ontario government should be doing more to invest in cycling. As an overview, interest and support has increased, emerging consensus that both levels of government should promote cycling and active transportation, and a growing support for a wide range of activities. So, in summary, the conversation is changing. There's increased awareness across a broad spectrum of indices. People are understanding that cycling has benefits, whether it's our health, quality of life, community development, the tax base. I have a nice quote from Calgary at the end from the head of their Economic Development Corporation that will really show you how the needle is moving. My final sort of piece of my presentation deals with our Bicycle-Friendly Communities Initiative, which has been a real game changer for us. We launched this program in 2010 at AMO. I want to thank AMO for their partnership, actually. They're a terrific supporter of ours in terms of getting the message out. We now have 22 communities across our province that have been designated bicycle-friendly, 53% of our province's population. This platform for change and advocacy platform for cycling has really engaged mayors and councillors. Many of you in the room have applied and been successful. Some of you are applying now. The program is a game changer, and what you get back from us is a report. It's free. Have I mentioned it's free? And unlike some other wonderful programs like Communities in Bloom and so on, which are also lovely and which also speak to your civic pride, this is a program that provides you a considerable amount of heft and advice. You apply. Many communities, and Justin runs the program, so he'll tell you this too. Many communities apply and they say, but Eleanor, we don't deserve an award, we're not there yet. That's okay. Apply anyway, because you get a bunch of really smart people looking at your application and telling you where you should be focusing your energy and attention. You want the 5 things that you should be focusing on that are going to give you the biggest pager and the low-hanging fruit in the next 5 years? Ask us. We'll tell you, and we'll give you a report back. David McLaughlin actually sits on our judging panel, so you can log in today. But really, these are the kinds of quality people that are going to give you advice for free. And then he can pitch you on his business. But that's the kind of quality report that you're going to get back from us. And so I would urge you to think about going to our website, checking out the Bicycle-Friendly Community section, applying for the program, and getting some advice back from us. And, I'm not sure I mentioned this, but it's free. The town of Blue Mountains is one of our bike-friendly communities. They're a bronze. There's a kind of a really nice picture of a bunch of cyclists on their roads from the Centurion event that brings about 3,000 people to the community and pumps a lot of money into their community for the weekend. I know, the mayor's told me. It's fabulous and they love it. Here I am in Mississauga. Hazel was there that day. Councillor Fonseca and others accepting their bronze. They're on their way to silver pretty quickly, Mississauga. I expect them to be in the next round. There's London. There's the 5 E's of the bicycle-friendly community. So you apply, you get scored, we tell you how you've done it again. It gives you that platform to improve. And not only do you get feedback from us, but we dig down into your community and get feedback from your citizens too that tell you really, we think as people who live here, we think that this is how the municipality should be focusing their energy and attention. To prove that the conversation is changing, I just want to share with you this final thought. Here's Bruce Graham, and how delighted was I to see this. This is the CEO of Calgary Economic Development, and I'm just going to let you read that as an example of them weighing in on an important cycling issue in Calgary. Couldn't help it, the rest of the quote was good too. Sorry. We'd love to add a cycle track network to our people attraction toolkit before we see tens of thousands of new cars added to our rolling community. There's the head of the Economic Development Corporation in Calgary saying, do it now and get it done. And stop the conversation about should we or shouldn't we? We should. We need to do it. And this is the kind of leadership that we're seeing now. I was vice president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, as Dave mentioned in the long dissertation. So I represented big business in Ottawa, and I know how important your chambers are to you. We're seeing chambers come to the table and talk about the need for a safer, better network, and in the smaller towns, cycling tourism. This is the kind of leadership we're seeing now, and this is an example of how the conversation is changing. Thanks for your time this morning. I'll look forward to your questions. And a shameless plug, if you're interested in learning more about cycling in our province, learning from other municipalities, please join us at our Ontario Bike Summit in mid-April in Toronto. Thanks for your time.
We've been on the scene since 2008. She has made such a tremendous difference, because I've been around for a couple of decades, and I can tell you it's been a real pleasure to get to know Eleanor and to work with her, and the difference that she has made has just been outstanding. So just thanks again, Eleanor. It's always a pleasure to hear what the organization is doing. I am one of the lucky people that I have a job that I absolutely love. I'm working with 68 waterfront communities to create a waterfront trail. And why is that important to cycling? Because that trail is playing a big role not only regenerating our waterfronts, but in fostering a cycling culture, a rebirth in cycling. People are getting on that trail and rediscovering their love of cycling. Walkers get on it as well, but cyclists love it because they can actually, the more connections I make on the waterfront trail, the more communities they get to visit when they realize that the town of Lakeshore on the Lake St. Clair is actually connected to Windsor and all the way down to the town of Essex, and in fact, all the way to Toronto. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, about our project on the Waterfront Trail, and tell you how that plugs into cycling tourism. So first off, our organization, I want to go through this quickly because I'm really looking forward to Dave's presentation. We've been around a long time. Couple of decades, we've taken various forms. We started off as a Royal Commission. How many here know David Crombie? David Crombie was the founder, headed up the Royal Commission. He's still very much involved within our work. We became a provincial agency charged with the task, among many, to create a waterfront trail. And at that time, we were looking at the communities from Burlington to Trenton. And in 1999, and I won't go into the long story of how and why, but we became a registered charity, independent of government. And I'm now proud to say that we've been a charity longer than we were ever an agency or a Royal Commission, and we've quadrupled the scope of the trail. We've more than tripled the size of the partnership. So with a focused mandate and an amazing partnership, we're making some pretty impressive accomplishments. The Waterfront Regeneration Trust job is, of course, to manage that partnership. That partnership involves over 100 municipalities, conservation authorities, agencies and NGOs. We work very closely with Share the Road, and it's our job to work on trail-wide initiatives so that we can connect everybody's waterfronts and make sure that we are conveying to the public the full scope of the project and getting them to use the trail. This year we just finished an exercise in a strategic planning exercise that was funded by the Ontario Trillium Foundation. And our partnership is so thrilled with the work, so proud of what they've been able to accomplish on their waterfronts and by connecting their waterfronts, that they actually gave us a very bold mandate to expand the trail to include all the Great Lakes. And that's not such a fancy sort of pie-in-the-sky dream, because there's already work well underway from Sault Ste. Marie and Sudbury, around Georgian Bay, and of course going all the way up to Grand Bend, which makes this a very doable legacy in the near future. And with this expanded mandate, of course, what's driving it is not only our love to and our commitment to regenerate our waterfronts and revitalize our communities, but it's the opportunity that is represented by having a connected, attractive, accessible waterfront on the Great Lake. What we're finding is that the waterfront trail, we saw it in the last quote that Eleanor just showed with the quote from the Calgary Economic Development Corporation. Young people today are driving less. They are drawn to communities where there are active transportation opportunities. They want to cycle on their holidays. That's what they like to do. There's some great article in The Economist from September that actually calculates kids aren't even getting their driver's license. When I was 16, I couldn't get that driver's license fast enough. But it's not the same with my kids. My daughter's boyfriend doesn't even want to get a license. I'm kind of good, but I'm okay with that. That's a good thing. So if you go in and take a look at that article, you'll just see what the changing trend is. And as we're trying to draw new people into our communities to live and show off that we have competitive, attractive communities where people can invest and bring their businesses, where people can move and live, we're going to need to respond to that desire for those kinds of active transportation opportunities. Now, we first got on the radar, first understood the opportunity of cycle tourism by watching Bella Quebec. Bella Quebec has been in the game for about 40 years now, building that cycling culture. And they have been measuring, and they have a wonderful report on their website, which I would recommend that you take a look at. They've actually defined what the cycling tourists are, and what they've learned is that cycling tourists stay longer, and they spend more money, and they travel in the shoulder seasons, and they are very well heeled. They're usually earning $75,000 or more, and they want to come to Ontario. We've done our own polling to gratify that. So that became a market that we began to talk to our partners about. If we can create a cycling route, a signed cycling route that can attract people, you're going to be able to reap the benefits of having made the investment in the waterfront trail. And domestically, the first two bullet points point out that Ontarians as well want to form the basis of a very exciting domestic tourism market. It's one of the things that most people may not realize is, by and large, Ontario tourism is Ontarians visiting Ontario. So if you want to attract the biggest segment of tourists to your area, you've got to tap in to all those Ontarians who are spending nearly $400 million a year when they go on holiday, which always includes a cycling component. And of course, the untapped is the 70% of Ontarians who want to cycle more. That comes from Eleanor's statistic. So a bit more about cycling tourism and about Quebec. The Quebec cycling, we are actually, the Waterfront Trail, the Waterfront Regeneration Trust, along with a number of other partners, has been going to the Montreal Bike Show now annually for some time. And we've been promoting the Lake Ontario Waterfront Trail and Ontario as a cycling destination. And one of the great gratifying moments and milestone of creating the Waterfront Trail was to have the first Grand Tour come to Ontario and use the Waterfront Trail in 2011. The Grand Tour set a new record for itself. It brought 2,200 Quebec cyclists to Ontario. And we traveled with that in an information pavilion every day, and we found out that people found that our roads were good, that the drivers were polite. Sometimes it takes a visitor for us to realize that we have it pretty good here, because of course if you ask an Ontarian that, the roads aren't good enough, it's not safe, it's scary. That's not the way the Quebecers experience the route at all. And they are coming back again this year. I am so thrilled that they will be coming to the Niagara area and they will be experiencing parts of Lake Ontario and the Lake Erie's waterfront trails. In terms of the U.S., which is the other big bike cycling tourism market, and the thing that we should really be reaching for, that's a $47 billion industry annually. That Americans who cycle like to travel, they will come to Canada, they come to our Great Waterfront Trail Adventure, and in fact, they're looking for new product. That map shows you how Adventure Cyclists, one of the leading cycle touring organizations in the United States, is marketing routes in Ontario now already. So we should be doing more of that to bring more of those tourists into the province. And one of another little moment of pride for the Waterfront Trail partners and partnerships is the Waterfront Trail was mentioned as one of the top 10 cycling experiences. So for me, that's really important that we're getting into the minds of two of the most promising cycling markets, the Quebec market and the American market for Ontario. Another big indicator of the success of cycling tourism is a sister organization called Ontario by Bike. It's built on model after Bienvenue Cycliste, and it's run by Transportation Options. They have over 800 participating locations. Most of those are businesses. So to the point that Eleanor was making with that final slide, businesses see the value in marketing to cyclists. Your chambers of commerce, your economic development offices are signing up to figure out how that they can draw cyclists in there. If you notice, all of Lake Ontario and most regions on the Lake Erie Waterfront Trail have Ontario by Bike certified businesses along there. And of course, CAA. We own, and it makes sense. It makes sense. We love our Great Lakes. As Ontarians, the Great Lakes are what define us as unique in Canada. All of Canada's Great Lakes, they belong to us. And it just seems like an incomplete picture to people when they look at this map and they come and say, you'll be the end of Sarnia. And they're like, oh, no, Marlene. You gotta understand that there's beautiful, when we were in the town of Lakeshore, the guy, Todd Schumacher, couldn't believe we would stop there. You know it's almost all off-road trail, all off-road, all the way up to Sarnia. So we took a look at it, absolutely. And we know that at our last partners meeting, we announced we were going to Grand Bend, and I got an email from Huron County. They've got a plan, and they think we can expand it. So again, this is a very community-driven project. We want to make it easy to access our Great Lakes. We want this to be a showcase for our province. Those Great Lakes have worked hard for us, and now we can give back to them and showcase them in the way they deserve. So what does it mean to have a waterfront trail? Well, it means, I've learned over the years, because I've been in it since the beginning, it needs to be signed. So this is an example of a trailhead sign that we located staging areas. There's also directional signs that show that bird, leaf fish, that you see at the top right. The trail must be signed, and it must be continuous. So it's not going to be perfect. We tried perfect. First 15 years, only if it's not off-road, it's not at the water's edge, we'll just treat that as a gap, and that'll be for the next day. And what we learned by the year 2000 is we had no brand at all. Nobody had any confidence in the Waterfront Trail as a real thing. Oh yeah, I've seen those signs, but it's not real, it's not connected. And we had to work our tails off to fix that. And we realized that to fix it, we needed to talk to people that could get us through those gaps. The hikers found us these great little off-road areas through the natural areas, but it was the cyclists that said, oh, sure, you can get from Vixen's Wood to the second marsh, if you follow this road and you do that. That's what the cyclists did. And when we started to go on the roads, we had to reach out to the transportation planners and the engineers. And thank God there were leaders and progressive thinkers that said, yes, we can make that happen. So this trail is always going to need to use on road, and I'll get a little bit more about how much of it is going to have to become lake. So we are always going to do the holding to the engineering expertise to make that happen. So what does the waterfront trail hold now? We call it Wonderful Ontario Waterfront. Well, 2 Great Lakes, 3 binational rivers, UNESCO, 19 provincial parks, 90 beaches. We have a fantastic trail. I won't go into this because, again, I want to make sure that there's time for Dave to speak. We have 10 bicycle-friendly communities. Very proud of that. So of the 22 that have signed up, 10 are on the waterfront trail, and more are coming, I understand. So what does the trail look like? It's not all road. This is the legacy piece, right? Dedicated off-road path, 21%. Another 21% is on residential streets or rural roads. Very quiet, gorgeous heritage settings. 58% is on secondary highways. So you can see, if you like to see a nice big shoulder, those shoulders are critical to building the confidence and the feeling of comfort, not only for the cyclists, but for the motorists that are using that road as well. And the trail is largely a story of small communities. 27% of the hamlets and villages have a population under 10. 40% of the communities that are connected have populations between 10 and 35,000. 27% have populations between 40 and 200,000. And then only 7% are major urban centers with populations of 500,000 and over. City of Toronto being one of them. City of Toronto, over 50% of the people say they're cyclists. For many of our local partners, they want us to connect them to Toronto, so Torontonians will actually begin to spend their vacation weekends out in their communities. We've released a report called Leading a Movement for Waterfront Regeneration for Ontario's Great Lakes, or we should say for Canada's Great Lakes. This is available on our website, so I encourage you to take a look at it. What we did was create a Google-based system where we went out on the trails and we started calculating what's on road, what's off road, what has 1.2 meter shoulders, what doesn't. And it's all up there for the public to see. The public loves following the progress. And in fact, our partners can actually add. This is a dynamic tool that we can work on together. This is an example of a partner note we have and an alert that's available. And these are the projects. 140 projects are underway on the waterfront trail to improve it. One of the more exciting ones is, of course, closing the gap between Whitby and between Ajax and Whitby, and moving the trail off Bailey Road and winding it around 2 potentially significant wetlands. It's only taken 20 years to find the investment to make that happen. So again, my point being, we have done all the easy bits that are off-road. We're now having to wait a long time, so we need to do the best we can with the infrastructure that we have. Some other, again, I'll just breeze through these. They'll be available. And this is a picture of the website page where you'll go to Partner Resource and just pull down the state of the trail to get that document and that inventory if you're interested. So over 60% of the trail is on road along Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River, but 88% is on road along Lake Erie. And 21% on Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River is on road with narrow mineral shoulders. That is, they fall below the 1.2 meters. So we have to watch that, make sure that we're aware of the traffic counts, and of course the new transportation manual that we'll be talking as well, going to be informing a lot of those discussions. So happy cyclists on road sections of trail. People are afraid, but when they come on the Great Waterfront Trail Adventure, they fall in love with cycling. We do not have the big spandex group. We have average people that have an aspiration to do a big ride like this. And when they come, they fall in love with cycling. And they love what they see, and they feel safe. And the new route that we're working on is the Greenbelt route. That'll be another 470 kilometers of signed cycling route. That's what makes it a marketing venture. That's what makes it good for economic development, that it's a signed, continuous route. That's going to be all on road except for the Caledon Way in Peel. I want to end by inviting you to the GWTA. That's the Great Waterfront Trail Adventure. We hold this annually. We take people, it's called the Learn by Doing and Show Me tour. We start at one end of we used to start at one end of the trail and go to the other end, but it's too long now. So now we're going to do, this year we'll do the St. Lawrence River part of the Waterfront Trail. It's fully supported by CAA, so you don't have to worry about changing your tire, you don't have to worry about carrying your bags, but you will fall in love with cycling and you will get to see what good cycling facilities are, and you'll get to hear what people have to say about the roads that you've been designing and the cycling facilities that you've been working on. I really hope that you consider joining us for this. We get a lot of media coverage for that event, so we're expecting more and more people to want to cycle and to cycle that particular route. As you can see, we do a survey result. 85% will take another cycling tour. 83% will come back to the area we showcased that year. 93% agree that the Waterfront Trail is a tourist attraction. It took us a long time to convince the Ministry of Tourism that it was a tourist attraction. We were able to use these polls to help make that case. And 95% agreed that the Waterfront Trail provided a good cycling experience. Even though it is largely on road, they developed a comfort and confidence being on there. Jane did. She came with us on our mobile workshop. So, thank you. Waterfront Trail is a success by nudges, not by organizations, but by individuals who share our commitment to regenerate the waterfront and to give public access. We need your leadership, we need your talent to solve the problems and make sure that our trail is the best that it can be at any time. So thank you very much for what you've done for us already, and we look forward to working with your profession in the future.
So, I realized that I was following YouTube during the presentation. I would have rethought this exercise. I've had the opportunity to work with Marlene and Eleanor for many years now, and I've learned a lot from both of them. I don't think I've ever been up here presenting with both of them. I'm not sure I'll do that again. Anyways, thanks a lot. My name is Dave McLaughlin. I'm with the members, and I'm part of the team who helped to develop the Trail Traffic Manual Book 18. So my presentation is going to focus a little bit more on some of the new and emerging design solutions that will support the trail cycling strategy. And I think at the end we can have a discussion about what you see in my presentation as well as the other solutions. So just a quick little outline today. I'm going to talk a little bit about OCAM and what it is, how it was developed, what are the design guidelines intended for, what are some of the new emerging cycling design solutions in Book 18. Book 18 is a bit of a different traffic manual from the Ontario Traffic Manual series, and we're going to talk about that, and then we're just going to wrap up. So the purpose of OTM, how many of you know what the Ontario Traffic Manual series is? A few of you? So the Ontario Traffic Manual series is a series of documents endorsed by the province of Ontario that deal with signage, warning, information signs, pavement marking, signals. This sort of arms the Bible for traffic engineers and planners and engineers and for municipalities in the province of Ontario. There's a whole series of them. Book 18 is one of those that has been a long time really, and it's finally here in draft. It's going to be published, or it's in publication now, I understand. Hopefully it'll be before Governor's Ontario Bike Summit in April. So the OTM series is a series of reference manuals, as you can see in the top text. I'm not going to read that again, but its really key objective is safe driving behavior achieved by predictable roadway environment. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in the course of my presentation, touch on risk and liability, and talk about a process that municipalities should think about pursuing or going through when they're looking at designating routes in their municipality for cycling. So OTM Book 18 focuses on primarily on providing guidance on planning, design, and the operation of cycling facilities. Who are putting together? So it's really Ontario Traffic Council and the province of Ontario, the Ministry of Transportation, who were leaders in this and funded it, and 14 municipalities were funding contributors and staff actively involved in the development of these guidelines. This is a non-consultant assignment, and that was made clear to us in times. The municipalities who participate were really engaged in this. They've been waiting for this for a long time. They came to the table with a lot of ideas and design solutions they thought should be part of the manual. Some of them made it into the manual, some did not, and maybe in the next manual. That's an important thing to think about too. This manual is going to evolve over time, and I think that's probably the case for all the Ontario traffic manuals, is the need to update them. You'll notice that this manual has some new signs in it that are not in the other OTM manuals or signage. So there'll be some updates here. The consultant team was led by Andy Member, and we had support from Bella Quebec, Entrance Road Safety, and Ultimate Planning and Design in the United States. So who are the guidelines for? They're really for everyone. They're for planners and engineers, people involved in maintenance and operations, landscape architects, health professionals, and I could add many others. Educators, tourists, tourism bodies. It's an important manual. It's just not about design, it's about planning, and it's sort of linking all of these elements together in one document. And that's another reason why this is a bit of a different manual compared to the other traffic manuals. So a little overview. It's got 6 sections. First one is general information. I should probably news about this one. So it talks a little bit about bicycle features, rules of the road, highway traffic act. Talks about the design domain, the idea that there's not one design that fits all solutions. There's a design domain, and it's similar to a concept that was introduced to Geometric Design Guide for roadways in Ontario. And the concept being that the design solution needs to be appropriate for the location. There are some key principles that drive the design domain, but at the end of the day, a bike lane or a paved shoulder or a facility on one road in one part of the province may be designed differently than another part of the province. And there are reasons for that. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Bicycle network planning, talk about user characteristics, bicycle operating requirements, types of bicycle facilities, we introduce those. We talk about route selection criteria. It's really important to have a consistent set of route selection criteria. That's also been a challenge for municipalities across the province. People seem to be, a little concerned about how everyone is doing these things. So this manual is really trying to provide some kind of consistency to both the design, but how do you develop a network? How do you put signs in? It's really important. Chapter 4 is chapter 3 is sort of the bicycle facility selection tool. We're going to dig into a little bit today. It's a new tool that we hope to help municipalities guide them through a process to select appropriate facility types and document that process, which will be supportive of their risk management strategy and help them with reliability concerns. Chapter 4 is really the core of bike facility design, and Chapter 5 are all the other design-related items, not specific to specific facilities, like crossing rail corridors, crossing ramps and interchanges, and many other things. And then the last chapter is some suggestions on how you should implement a bike network where you set one up. So some of the emerging cycling design solutions. I'm not going to go through everything, but I wanted to introduce you to some of the new exciting things. Some of you may find them exciting, some of you may not. So the first one is this facility type selection process tool. It's a 3-step process. The first step is really to pre-select the facility. We're going to talk about the nomograph in a minute. The second one is really digging into details about the specific corridor, looking at collecting information, doing an assessment. And the final step is really confirming your decision. For example, road A, can you have that bike facility? Is it the appropriate road to have it? and to document the rationale. So they have that process documented, which is really important when someone comes in, oh, there's an accident or something on the highway, and someone comes in and says, oh, look at that sign on that road. Did someone go out and look at that road? What criteria did you use to assess whether or not that was appropriate to designate this particular road as a bike facility in your municipality? So OTM Book 18 provides you with some guidance to take you through that process. So step one, collect and review existing and future average daily traffic volumes. Look at the 85th percentile motor vehicle operating speeds on your roads. And then look at the nomograph, which is a new tool that's been developed. And engineers and planners, especially engineers, they love graphs and tables. They think that will give them the answer. Bad news. This graph doesn't give you the answer. But what it does do, it points you in the right direction to the next step. So if you look at the one side, it shows the various operating speeds and rural, suburban, and urban conditions. Along the bottom, it shows you traffic counts. It doesn't show you things like cycle lanes or curves or geometrics. It doesn't show you, how many trucks or buses are on this road. Really, what kind of land use is on this road. What are the destinations? That's the next step. What this does to you, it breaks it down to say, in Ontario we're trying to provide facilities that are more comfortable for people to use. There's no point investing in cycling infrastructure if no one's going to go there. And we're not Holland today, but we may be down the road. And this is one step forward for Ontario. So the blue zone is really in those areas where you have low volume road, they may be high speed, and some of the pictures that Marlene was showing is perfectly fine. And you have reasonably good sight lines to sign the road as is. Yes, you have to maintain the road. You have to maintain the road anyways under provincial guidelines. And bicycles are a vehicle under the Highway Traffic Act, so guess what? Your guidelines for maintaining your road also apply to bikes. So you're already obligated by law to be maintaining these roads. Shoulders are a bit of a different issue we'll talk about in a minute. When you get into the white zone, whether the AHT is higher or the speed is higher, then it's really an area where you should start thinking about adding brake shoulders on your roadways. So if you look at this table, if you have a road that's posted at 80, people are traveling at 85 and 90, and you've got 2,000 ADT on it in a rural community, it's probably okay to sign it if it's a flat road, like out in County of Essex, where you don't have a lot of curves or significant changes. You've got a good road platform. That's probably an appropriate design solution, but there are other things to think about before you come to that final decision. But once you get above 2,000, when you get into 2,500 or 3,000, you need to start thinking about providing paved shoulders or looking at parallel roads. And so that's what OTM Book 18 is recommending. When you start getting into high volumes, either moderate speed or higher speed, we really want you to start thinking about buffer paved shoulders and buffer bike lanes. And that's something new that's been added to this manual as well. You'll start to see them in different municipalities. If you have the opportunity to look at Sherwood in Toronto, for example, there's a cycle track there. If you go out to Wellesley, you'll see some buffer bike facilities and use the color treatment to sort of reinforce that this is a cycling route. If you go out to Highway 7 in your region, between Bayview and the 404, as part of the Viva Next project, you'll see a massive road. Highway 7 carries wheels of traffic. I'm not exactly sure what ADT is, but it's high. 6 lanes of traffic, transit way in the middle, and it's got buffer bike lanes with no protection. And people who are using it like it. It's different. You have to experience it to see how it operates. But it's one step. And the good thing about that road is that they're able to include a buffer somewhere down the road as that road changes. That buffer may become some kind of physical separation. Maybe something there that then physically separates the bike when the time comes for that. So the important thing in the design exercise is that they got the space. The red zone is basically, secondary highways where you have a lot of traffic and not a lot of road platform, and the cost to implement paved shoulders or other treatments to make it, reduce risk for cyclists. Get to the point where you really should be looking for another road. So OTM Book 18 gives you that process. Step 2 then are some of the details that you want to look at. So what's the functional street of a highway? What's the difference? How many cars and trucks are on this road? OTM Book 18 talks about 30 an hour. Once you get above 30 an hour, you're starting to look at a sort of fairly busy road. Collision history, what's the collision history of that road? Sidelines, and what's the available right of way? These are key things that any engineer should be thinking about when they go out and do patrol, do investigation of their roads, and they should be doing those annually. That's part of their requirement for maintenance. Who are they anticipated users? Are they going to be waterfront trail users? Is it a tourist route? That's important, because not all of them will be student cyclists. Yeah, think about that. Is it a connection between a community and a plant? You know, a motor vehicle plant or something else? It's just on the periphery of town, where there's a lot of people using it in rush hour. We need to think about that and how to accommodate that. You know, who's using that route today? Is it a bike route today? Is that why you're looking at it? What are the costs to implement? How much money do you have? Money is important. And part of this process takes that into consideration. What's the function of the route? What's the bike network? Do you have a bike network? Is there some rationale why this road that you're looking at today is actually part of the network? What are the type of roadway improvement that you need to implement what this process suggests you should do? So if you have a good right-of-way, let's say you have 3.5 or 3.6 or 3.7 meter travel lanes on a two-way road, but your shoulder rounds. So you're going to have to build up that shoulder in order to add additional asphalt. And there's a cost to it, no question about it. Should you have paved shoulders on your roads? That depends on who you speak to, but I think the jury is pretty clear that adding at least 3/4 of a meter of paved asphalt will extend the life of the asphalt surface. Forget about bikes and pedestrians and everything else. So that's something that, from a life cycle point of view, you should already be thinking about. So if you're doing that, like some municipalities already are doing, then the additional cost to add another half meter, if the platform's there, may not be that great, especially if you do that at the time that you come in to resurface the road. On-street parking in urban areas, sensitive topic for sure. As a consultant, I can tell you, we don't like taking on-street parking off roads when we do these plans because we know what's going to happen. And there are solutions to get around that. And some solutions are not. We just finished a project in Kingston where we are removing some parking and shifting parking from side to side along the commercial street, Princess Street. Well, a lot of people are opposed to the idea. At the end of the day, council endorsed it and they're implementing it, and it has buffer bike lanes, including a buffer between the on-street parking where the bike facility is. So that's an example of some of the new designs that are being applied in Ontario. So step 3. So you've gone through this exercise. You've gone out and investigated the road, you've collected your data, you've had your transportation engineer run the numbers and think a little bit more about it, and you've documented that decision on where you think you want to go based on the money you have and what council's direction is, and you document it. That's one thing that we're not doing a very good job of. From a risk management liability view, you need to document the outcome of your decision. The argument about should it have been a buffer bike lane, should it have been a buffer paved shoulder, should it have been a path beyond a ditch and a road, that's a different issue. Someone went through an exercise to assess a roadway and came up with a decision based on that process that this facility was appropriate. And that's very important from a risk management strategy. A lot of municipalities aren't doing that at all, and that's one thing that OTM is recommending. So now I'm going to walk through some of the design guidelines that are in table 18. So the first one, I think, well, seeing the site, bicycle paved shoulder, we're recommending 1.5 as a minimum. You can go down to 1.2 in the external corridor, depending on the number of trucks and buses, whether or not there are any cycling issues. Really pushing buffer bike or paved shoulders in rural areas where there's secondary highways or there's higher volumes. And sometimes you can get that little buffer just by tweaking the width of the travel lane and adding a little bit more paved shoulder width. The photos you see, the top one in Halton Hills is an example. This is an urban area and it's an urban shoulder. So what's an urban shoulder? On this particular road, there are a lot of kids cycling to a high school at the end of the road. And there's debate among the community, do we want bike lanes and restrict parking? Not a lot of people park on the road during the weekdays. Everybody parks Friday night and Saturday night. That's when people are visiting and they want the ability to park on the road. So that the town decided, well, in discussion with consultants and the public, well, why don't we put an edge line in? Because speeding is also an issue. The edge line, we hope, sort of slow traffic down a little bit by narrowing travel lanes. And we'll still sign this road as a bike route. Those aren't bike lanes, it's a bike route. When cars park, when they're allowed to park, they'll be crossing over the line, but that's okay. and that's part of a step towards implementing a more formal facility. We had a road safety specialist do a review of this to decide whether adding that lane might increase the risk to users over not having a lane at all. And the outcome of it was a conclusion that, in fact, adding a lane probably reduces the risk. Because both motorists and cyclists, when they're going down a corridor like this, when you cross the line, you're a little bit more in tune with something's changing, rather than just crossing through space. So the other pictures you see, a shot of a real paved shoulder in Dufferin County, a fairly busy road, and a paved shoulder with a buffer and a rumble strip. We don't have a lot of rumble strips on the roads as they do for cycling in Ontario, but you're going to see more. You're going to see more because rumble strips are being implemented on roads by the province and by some municipalities as a road safety measure. And sometimes those roads are also the most appropriate location for a biker. So the new guidelines has what we call a rumble strip friendly design for bikers. So the rumble strip is broken in locations. It's framed by two white lines, different than what you see down. If you see a rumble strip on the side of the road, you see just the edge line and a rumble strip on the far side. If it's a bike facility, there'll be a second line that sort of frames that. And there will be breaks in that internal line so that a cyclist knows if they have to come out of that space, they don't need to ride across the rumble, they wait for the gap and ride between the rumble. So you'll see more of those over time. Conventional bike lane and a bike box. Again, I think many of you have seen these. Bike box is something new, but it's been around in some cities, especially the United States, and we have them in different places here in Ontario. The whole idea is to give some priority to cyclists, especially for left-turning cyclists. So just move the stop bar back. And the use of green is optional in Book 18, but you'll see that many municipalities are using green service streets and conflict zones more and more. And it's very powerful. If you have a chance to drive through Highway 7, you can bike just go for a ride, drink away, or take a look at the intersections. And just see how the intersections pop. And ask yourself, do you really realize as a motorist driving on a corridor how these intersections have been designed to improve for everyone's understanding how pedestrians and cyclists are crossing the intersections. And I think you'll answer that yes. And the use of the green really reinforces that point. So, buffer bike lanes, they come in lots of different forms. This is just a few examples. The standard pavement marking buffer, which is what's being implemented in Kingston. Adding flexible bollards. You just can't keep cars out of that space in an urban area because delivery trucks are going in there and they're willing to pay the fines, and adding flexible bollards may be a solution. Do you take them out of winter? The jury's still out, probably. So that's something to consider. Adding planters in the middle. Again, working with the BIA in an urban area and have them help you with the planter is something that is raising some interest among BIAs. Municipality stores them during the winter, they put them back in. The BIA is responsible for maintaining them, flowers and everything. So it's an interesting solution. It provides some physical separation. You want some gaps in between them again to allow cyclists to come and go because it is a bit of a problem if they get trapped in that space. And then we have buffering bike facility. You still have a buffer to make sure that the car going outside or opening a door on the right. You'll notice that the width is a little bit, minimum width has been raised to 0.8 from 0.5 to recognize that it's not a lot, but it's better than the alternative. So separated bike lanes with barriers. You'll see more and more of these. The barriers may take different forms, but this is an example of treatment sort of similar to Laurier in the city of Ottawa, and also Sherburne cycle trucks in Toronto, even though this is actually a bike lane on the road surface. Barriers have been implemented. And you'll see the left turning boxes. So this is a two-stage left turn. So the cyclists, if they want to turn left, they proceed through into the intersection, move into that gap where that white box is, wait for the light to change, and then go ahead and proceed on the green. The negative with this is that right turns on red are restricted at an intersection like this. And there are to the corner of the curb, and they're able to do that because they move their pedestrian crossings further away from the intersection to better connect with the transit stations. So it created more real estate at the intersection. So I think it provides a really good standardized tool for municipalities to use to help them with their concerns about risk management, liability, provides a tracking mechanism and a way to document their decisions. And we hope it's a model for other provinces and territories to use. And just one final thing, Ontario Traffic Council, sort of the body that facilitated this, is planning on rolling out workshops in municipalities across the province in late 2014 or 2015 for staff to come and learn how to use the tool. Thank you very much.